Hello, everybody. Good morning, also to the rest of the US. Welcome to today's lecture, and also welcome back our New Year's break. We had a break of over 1 month. We have a very special guest today. It's James Lende from the Human-Centered AI Initiative at the Stanford University. It's an initiative with similar goals and objectives to our initiative. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation, James. He will be introduced in more detail by Moshe, who is our moderator of today. Thanks, Moshe, for doing that. Just short for all those who might be new to our lecture, we have the choreography is that we have a talk for 30 minutes, then we have 30 minutes Q&A, and this is moderated by Moshe Wadi. And at the end, we have our piece of music, as always. And it's, as always, proposed by James today. Thanks for proposing. And the management of the music will be done by Peter Knies. Thanks, Peter, for that. And now I welcome our moderator, Moshe Wadi. There's no need to introduce him. He is with us from the early beginning. And now I pass over to you, Moshe. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hannes. Thank you, Jim, for joining us today. Just a brief introduction about Jim, my longtime colleague. I'm very happy to see him join us today. He's a professor of computer science and long title, Anand Rajamaran and Venki Harinarayan, professor in School of Engineering at Stanford. And he's a co-founder and vice director of the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, which he's going to talk about it today. He's been in much demand over the years, so one institution snatches him from another institution. He's incredibly well known for his research in human-computer interaction. He's a member of the CKI Academy and ACM Fellow, served on NSF Science Advisory Committee for several years. And when I took on about 15 years ago the project of revitalizing CSEM, and we wanted to have also to revitalize the website, and we needed I put together a committee of experts, and Jim was the first on my list. And today he's going to talk today about AI for good versus human-centered AI. The con is yours, Jim.
Great. Thank you for that kind introduction. Are you able to see my slides okay?
Yep.
Okay. So AI is a powerful tool, but it's critical that we design AI systems at what I term the user, the community, and the society level. You can start by designing with communities beyond your direct user population. And if you do, you'll create AI systems that are more likely to have a positive societal impact. I've been working on defining this new model of AI design for the last few months. And today I hope to make these ideas clear as I speak about the need for a more human-centered view of artificial intelligence. Okay. So as you know, AI is taking the world by storm in many areas, from scientific discovery with tools like AlphaFold to natural language processing with very usable speech recognition, language translation, and agents like ChatGPT that I'm sure many of you have been playing with over the last month or two, to AI-driven fashion design, to even working robotics, though maybe not yet this sci-fi future of interacting with smart social robots. But the most common place we see artificial intelligence making impact today is in manipulating our social network feeds, causing people to feel bad, or even worse, to be deceived and outraged, even upending democracies all over the world. Or we see AI helping judges to set bail or sentencing for suspected criminals in a way that is biased by race, as has been shown in studies of the Compass program in the United States. These are just some of the reasons we founded the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, or HAI, 3 years ago, with 3 guiding principles. The first is AI should be inspired by human intelligence. The human brain remains the single most sophisticated device in the known universe, and we should strive to learn all we can from its nature. Next, AI should be guided by concern for its impact on human society. This technology is too potent to consider its effects after the fact, compelling us to explore its ethical implications before, during, and after its development. Finally, AI should augment, not replace, human capabilities. It's inevitable that AI will reshape significant swaths of the global workforce, and we need to prepare ourselves for upheaval in the coming generations. Though with proper guidance, we believe AI can enhance the quality that makes us human. And I'll talk about this more as I go through the talk. Now, because of the negative social impacts of AI that I've given you a few examples of, we've seen a proliferation of AI for good initiatives beyond what we've done at Stanford with HAI. And there are two main ways that I see most of these types of efforts going. The first type of initiative is often made up of social scientists who notice and critique the potential harms of AI. And that's quite useful, but that doesn't help us apply AI in positive ways. It might avoid some problems after the fact, but we'd like to get to these warnings earlier. How do we proactively design to avoid these issues? The second type of effort, which is both more common and often fails, is when technologists try to go it alone. Typically, AI experts see an important social impact area like health and apply AI naively so that it doesn't actually work in practice. This has happened repeatedly, but it has occurred acutely in short-term crises like the COVID pandemic, as you see the article here talking about. But it's also occurred repeatedly over the long term. For example, in 2016, Turing Award winner Geoff Hinton, the Turing Awards like the Nobel Prize in computer science, Geoff Hinton said, "We should stop training radiologists now, as AI will easily surpass humans within 5 years." This has not worked out. Not in AI for radiology, not in AI for skin cancer detection, and not in AI in several other areas, often due to differences between the ideal data sets that the researchers train and test their algorithms on, and the messiness of the data found in real-world hospitals and clinics. Even worse, often these researchers don't even solve the right problem. For example, instead of trying to replace radiologists, we might want to have AI systems working in tandem with the radiologist to make this technology more useful. Let's augment the radiologist's capabilities rather than replace them. This recent New York Times opinion piece quotes my Stanford radiology and AI colleague, Kurt Langlotz, who writes in one of his papers, "Will AI replace radiologists? Is the wrong question." Instead, he wrote, "The right answer is radiologists who use AI will replace radiologists who don't." The big problem is we do not know how to design AI systems to have positive human impacts. And I believe there's a better way to design AI for positive human impact. This better way is what I term human-centered AI. How do we get positive outcomes from AI? That is, what would it have taken to have avoided the negative outcomes from Compass's AI-assisted sentencing? To avoid these outcomes, we must design and analyze these systems at 3 levels in conjunction, in terms of the user, the community, and society. I want you to imagine how your own projects that use AI might change for the better if you leverage these 3 levels of analysis. I believe that if you do, you will create technology that has a better chance of making a positive impact. So what do I mean by human-centered AI and these 3 levels of analysis? First, human-centered AI is about the scope of who we study to find our problems, develop our solutions, and evaluate our systems. To do this, we first need to have a user-centered process. That is, to integrate well-known techniques from human-computer interaction and design that account for the needs and abilities of end users of computing systems early and often, and rapidly iterate and improve a design through rigorous testing. But we must go beyond just having good process. We need to creatively develop new designs that augment people by accounting for their cognitive abilities and existing workflows. And we should base these on underlying theories about how and why people behave the way they do. This will help us develop AI systems that work for humans rather than futilely trying to replicate humans. But this alone is not enough. As has been illustrated by some of the harmful examples I mentioned previously, we can't only design around the user. That would be like designing the sentencing system just for the judge using it, creating a nice user interface that they could understand the data, but that would ignore some of the same underlying systemic issues. It would ignore the community that the system impacts, the people who are accused, their families, the lawyers, the victims, their families. We need to understand the issues of the different communities they come from and the structural barriers they face, for example, racism, before we can more appropriately design that sentencing system. Maybe some of these people that we think about at this community level would become users, and should be included at that user-centered level of design. But even that is not enough. We also need to understand what impacts are on society at large. What does it mean, for example, to have a large percentage of African-American males in prison in the US, or a large percentage of people who are caught using illegal drugs? These issues have immense societal costs, and we need to be able to forecast what might happen if the software we're building becomes ubiquitous and designed with that intent to mediate for potential societal impacts. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. In fact, this is all very hard, especially for computer scientists. And that's why, to do this properly, you need true interdisciplinary teams. So not only technologists and AI experts, but also experts from design, experts from the social sciences and humanities, and domain expertise depending on the area. So experts in fields such as medicine, law, environmental science, or transportation. These experts must be true partners on AI projects from the start, rather than added near the end to investigate possible harms. Now, I want to run you through what this type of analysis might look like for two more examples beyond sentencing. The first is from the literature and popular press, and then the second, I'll critique one of my own research projects. So, what does this human-centered AI analysis look like for autonomous cars? Here's a Tesla with its autopilot feature. Whether now or in 10 years autonomous cars will happen, it's just really a question of the definition of how much autonomy and how broadly it will be used. Some will claim this is already here, and some will claim it will never be here or won't be here for a long time. But I will claim that what most university researchers have done previously in the first 30 plus years of this research area, and now what many of the car companies have done as well, is primarily look at the user-centered level, i.e. the driver of the car. What the driver might see on the displays, such as this large display in the center console of a Tesla that tells you what's going on with respect to the maps. Or more importantly, what the driver sees when in autopilot mode, here behind the steering wheel. What should it show, or how should we get the attention of the driver when the system is less sure about its inferences due to the weather, due to the lack of recent maps, or due to other cars and their behavior? That's all really more at the driver level. But these other levels of analysis at the community and the society level are quite important to solving or even posing this problem correctly, I would argue. At the community level, we care about other drivers and their behavior, whether in autonomous cars or non-autonomous cars. We care about studying interactions with pedestrians and bicyclists. These have all been an afterthought for these efforts and have led to many of the problems that might have been avoided if they had been considered much earlier on in the conception of autonomous driving. Finally, at the society level, we need to consider the impacts of autonomous cars on a city or region. Maybe the impacts are not as positive as the enthusiasts might lead you to believe. Some studies have shown that autonomous cars will lead to more traffic and more deaths due to driving more miles, living further away, and sending cars around empty. And these aren't just newspaper headlines, but are based on research, for example, by transportation experts at Moshe's own university at the in his own region. This is at the University of Texas, Kara Kokelman's group, who found at least in the Texas Triangle mega region, so Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, autonomous cars will likely swamp traffic due to the changes in behavior that these AI-based cars might bring. With this type of analysis from the start, we might decide our societal resources might be better spent on building a better public transit system. If we only analyze and design at the user-centered level at the start, we may ignore these important questions until it's too late. So many Americans don't necessarily see this. We have this very car-centric culture. Many of you online, I know, are in Europe, where things are quite different. I just returned from a trip to Germany and Switzerland, and it's stark how different the public transportation can be. And if we think about these things at the right time, we might take our societal resources in a different way. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that there's no related work in this space and that I'm the only one coming up with this. The fields of HCI and design have been working at the user-centered level for 50 years. And there are many known techniques. And in fact, there's a great newer work applying these specifically to AI. For example, this good paper by Amershi et al. On guidelines for human AI interaction. At the community-centered level, a well-known technique that may be useful here is value-sensitive design, developed by Batya Friedman and David Hendry at the University of Washington, which helps designers find and be explicit about the values of users rather than just the values of the designers. And there are new ideas such as design justice by Costanza Chok. At the society-centered level, there is less well-known techniques on how to design for this, but there is good recent work pointing out what some of the problems are. For example, Safia Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression. One of the key questions for me is how to integrate these ideas into a coherent design process. Let me just put my blinds down here. I'm not used to the early morning sun right into my eyes here. Okay. So now that I've given you an idea of what human-centered AI is, I'd like to take you through one of my own projects that uses AI and show you where it's human-centered and also where we can do better. This human-centered AI lens that I just presented to you is changing this project for the better after some early missteps. The motivation for our hybrid physical digital spaces project is that many Americans are overstressed, inactive, wasteful, uninspired, and feeling isolated in their work or schools. We also observe that people spend much of their time inside the built environment with these afflictions. In fact, 87% of our time is in homes and offices, according to the US EPA in the US. And we wanted to understand how features of the built environment, such as materials, access to light or nature, as well as the user experience, so for example, noise or dynamic digital displays, impact people's well-being. And so we've run some experiments showing these connections, but now I just want to show you the vision of how we might use this information to change behavior and wellness. So there's a growing awareness that our time spent in buildings can negatively impact our wellness. But the science behind this awareness and the recommended strategies to improve the situation are actually quite thin. This surprised me when we started the project. I thought the architects and civil engineers would have done all the studies. They haven't. We're interested in learning how can we build up the science to understand how buildings affect people? How can we redesign spaces that account for these understandings? And then finally, how do we design systems that can sense our afflictions and dynamically adjust our spaces to help improve our health and wellness, and do that in privacy-preserving ways? So we did the first thing right. We started with a strong interdisciplinary team that includes expertise in buildings and architecture, computing, including human-computer interaction, security, and AI, and experts in people, including psychology, health, privacy and law, education, and organizational behavior, all with a passion for creating a better built environment. But when we started, we were not using this human-centered AI lens that I just described to you. And I'll also admit that is that human-computer interaction person on the project, I was really focused at that bottom user-centered level. But now I'm going to use this human-centered AI lens as I go through pieces of the project to illustrate where some of the gaps might be. So we based our initial ideas on a model that illustrates how building features, individual outcomes, organizational outcomes, and societal outcomes are linked. And by building features, we mean things about the design and construction, but also about the user experience. So for example, how noisy is it? Is there access to natural light? What type of materials are used, and is there access to nature? If these are negative, like I've shown here, they can lead to bad individual outcomes like stress, anxiety, and distraction. This is at the user-centered level. These in turn lead to organizational or community outcomes, such as a lack of productivity, waste, and a sense or lack of belonging. That's at the community-centered level. And then finally, these community or organizational outcomes can have impact at the societal level. They can have impact on our economy, our environment, our health and well-being. So at least we are thinking about these three levels a bit from the start. In fact, this slide came from our initial pitch for funding on this project. Okay, let's see if I can get the next slide. So what I want you to do is imagine an office in the future, for example, where maybe we can detect the stress of a worker and adapt their space to have more natural scenery, lower the lights maybe, or change the music to reduce their stress. Or we might have dynamic ambient murals in public spaces and on personal devices. So imagine this wall where the petals are blowing in the wind down the wall in one direction. And that might encourage me to follow the wall in that direction, maybe towards the stairs rather than the elevator, getting more exercise and also saving the building energy. Or towards that new person in the office at the end of the hall that I haven't met yet, and I might more likely run into them by walking in that direction. That's a vision of the future where buildings and people interact in a way that positively shapes our well-being. But I'll admit, it's a very techno-optimist future. But how would we even get to this future? So there is actually a nascent well-building movement similar to the earlier environmental building movement exemplified by LEED certification. And well, let's talk about what's been done in the field so far. So most of the studies behind this well-building movement have been relatively small scale. They've also generally been short-term with limited populations and are really based on self-report. So the way they generally work is you have a group of people who are going to be moving out of a building. So you give them a bunch of standard surveys about a month before the move. And then after the move, after they've settled in for a month, you give them the surveys again. That's really the extent of the type of research that's been done mainly in this space. So we're taking a more integrated and scientific approach. Our first step is to establish the science and understand how different building attributes impact occupant states in naturalistic settings over long periods. And then we want to design adaptations, including dynamic ones that can help support well-being. And then finally, before we create and deploy any of those technologies, we need to understand what type of sensing and data collection people are willing to work with and which they prefer not to have. And so I'm going to discuss these three issues in turn. So after some preliminary online experiments, we ran a year-long controlled lab experiment on campus with over 400 people. So in this experiment, we systematically varied building features such as natural or artificial materials, natural or artificial light. We literally built a wall over the windows on one of two identical offices. And then we varied the images on the walls to depict diverse or non-diverse individuals. So here in this slide, you can see the different conditions. We had participants wear Empatica watches so we could collect electrodermal activity, which is a measure for stress. And we also used standard surveys on stress, belonging, creativity. And by the way, we had to stress them out on purpose. So we asked people in the middle of this that we're going to ask you in 2 minutes to give a talk on your positive and negative personality characteristics and record it. And as you might expect, the stress went right up. So I'm going to show you the biggest results here. The condition with natural materials helped decrease the stress in participants. This was seen both with subjective survey that you see on the left and with the electrodermal activity, or EDA, which you see on the right. So participants who are exposed to the windows also had lower stress impacts, but not as large as what we saw with the natural wood. As we run these types of experiments in more naturalistic settings over longer periods, we need to use more sophisticated methods to measure our outcomes more automatically, because we can't expect in a real setting that people are going to just be filling out these surveys all the time. So we are really interested in improving the following 5 outcomes: stress, belonging, creativity, physical activity, and environmental behavior. We were intentional to not explore productivity, as it is one area that's been more explored, but also because it introduces serious concerns of management misuse. So think about Amazon warehouse workers who are fired if they're not meeting quota for how many boxes that they can pack in an hour. So how are we going to do this more automatically? So we will triangulate using 3 types of sensors to infer these outcomes. So we start with self-report, but we move beyond the simple surveys that have been done in the past. What we want to do is use what's called experience sampling method, where we ask a short survey question periodically during the day. So something you can answer in under 5 seconds. For example, how stressed are you on a scale of 1 to 10? This is something you might answer on your watch or your phone. We can also use all those building sensors that have been put into buildings for sustainability and security purposes, which lets us know, for example, how many people are in a room, what's the energy use, and how much recycling has occurred. And then finally, we'll get much of our data by leveraging the personal sensors that people are carrying and wearing every day. So phones, watches, laptops. These sophisticated sensing devices let us get at physical activity and stress through physiological sensing, like we did in our lab experiment. Now, because this type of data that we are using is highly personal and sensitive, it's important to include both non-technical and technical approaches to privacy and security. Privacy has been part of our research agenda that we've actively pursued from the start. And so we want to assess people's comfort level with collecting this type of data. That includes exploring ways for people to communicate their privacy preferences to the building. All our studies are opt-in, and we have ways for people to view and delete their data as part of the design. And finally, we need to secure the data and restrict analysis and queries on a need-to-know basis. But I would claim this is only user-centered design. There might be a tiny bit of community-centered design, for example, opting in or not. But this really had me feeling that something really fundamental was missing here in the research. So let's think about the features that I've shown you and see what levels we were designing at. So at the user-centered level, we're mainly thinking about building residents who would want these features for themselves, features that would encourage more exercise or sense and adapt to their stress, and keep their data private keeping their data private was on our mind from the start. At the community-centered level, we were thinking about helping people meet new people to build community, and also how to maybe protect the privacy of others in the community who might have come into the building, for example, delivery drivers. But that was about it. And at the society level, we weren't really considering much. Maybe these impacts on the economy or public health, but we weren't really thinking about the societal impacts of a smart building like this. How might we get at the community-centered and society-centered issues? Now I'm going to show you some of our newer research that tries to get a better understanding at these higher levels. So this uneasiness with some of the privacy implications at the community and society level led us to develop and run several design workshops. This is a participatory technique. These workshops have really helped us to do more of the community-based analysis that the project had been missing. We have workshop participants pose benefits and risks of this type of technology and work through these value trade-offs, as well as suggest potential interventions. We've now run the workshops with over 100 participants over 5 iterations, and it's been quite successful, but it's still early in this work to claim that is the correct way forward. Now, one of the big issues in smart spaces is how to communicate to individual users and the community about what is happening in a smart space. What data is being tracked and how is it being used? So a big part of our workshop was focused on how to communicate these issues to people who use our hybrid physical digital spaces. Now, one way that products currently communicate these issues today is using privacy policies. But these policies are useless. At left is an art piece where the artist has printed real privacy policies out from the products that you use every day. Nobody reads them. How many of you read these? Anybody want to show hands on the Zoom? Put a hands up there if you read these privacy policies in full. Okay. There's always a few, but these policies are purely a legal construct to protect the companies that write them from lawsuits. They aren't meant to communicate to you what's really going on with the product. Instead, we're looking for another way to communicate what's going on in a building. So we've been developing the idea of implication design. This is where we try to embed a product's ethical implications directly into its design. For example, this iCam here is a webcam shaped like
just a quick interrupt, Jim. Can you try to wrap up the next 5 minutes so we have some time for Q&A?
Yep, I'm definitely near there. Thank you. For example, the iCam here is a webcam shaped like a creepy human eye. You really know it's watching. This is a form of communication. You know what is going on. It's not ambiguous. There's some examples of this in the market today, but most of these interventions don't quite communicate the extent of the threat. For example, this little orange dot on your phone indicates it's recording, but this is only a first step. We believe that through speculative design, we can both imagine ways of communicating the threat and especially the extent of the threat through imagining alternative communication methods. Let's look at another example of a speculative artifact that might make this more obvious. This is the parasite. You put it on your smart speaker and it only unlocks when you give the keyword you've defined. You are assured Google, Amazon, or Apple are not listening into your conversations. It protects you and it communicates to you. We'd like to combine both these ideas, communication and protection, in our idea of implication design. So what does our design workshop look like? A key idea is that the participants are diverse in terms of domain knowledge, so that technologists, designers, domain-specific experts, and diverse in terms of their lived experience. The single-day workshop is lightweight and easy for everyone to participate in. It has 3 rounds that are structured by using a deck of cards where participants first anticipate positive and negative outcomes. Second, they prototype potential designs for communicating or mediating the implications of anticipated threats. And third, they play a role-playing game where groups try to pose a potential threat from the deck, and the paired team tries to use the designed artifacts to counter the threats. So here are some of the many artifacts that have come out of the workshops. At top is an uncertainty communicator. The idea here was to surface how uncertain a system was about an inference. At center is an anonymity bracelet that can anonymize the wearer's collected information. And note that these are not meant to be designs for products, but are artifacts or what might be termed experience prototypes that can be used to spark further design. But at this point in time, I think we haven't done enough of this. We haven't explored enough implication design to test with a community in a real space. And we haven't even touched on the societal implications of buildings that collect this data about occupants. If I use my human-centered AI analysis at all 3 levels in the hybrid physical digital spaces case, it might look something like this. So at the user-centered level, we work with and design with building residents, the companies that lease the space, building managers, and building owners. At the community level, we also should work with anyone who might come into the building or even the neighbors. And at the society level, we need to analyze carefully how these systems might impact many different groups, but in particular, people with disabilities or other marginalized identities that may not wish to disclose this to others. It also raises general questions of privilege in society. Who has access to these fancy health-shaping buildings and who does not? And what happens if these buildings are used for workplace surveillance? So far, we've focused on these lower portions of the 3 levels of analysis. The questions I've raised at the society-centered level of analysis imply this analysis must analyze questions of power, which is often left out of technology research. If the decision makers decide to prioritize the user-centered design for managers over the community-centered design for the workers, surveillance state buildings is what will result. And we need to design actively to avoid this. So this recognition of power reminds me of a great talk I saw in October by Ibram X. Kendi, the well-known author and MacArthur Award winner. President Crystal Williams of the Rhode Island School of Design asked Dr. Kendi, what can artists and designers do in creating an anti-racist society? He replied, what is missing is an analysis of power. Bring an understanding to people about power. We live in a moment when different identity groups are advocating for their rights, their power, their presence, and pushing back against the ways they've been degraded. What is missing are the bridges of solidarity. We need to constantly be building those bridges. Historically, you know who has built those bridges? Artists and designers. I believe we as designers need to take on the analysis of design at the 3 levels I've advocated, the user, the community, and society, so we can properly identify and take on power, so we can build those bridges of solidarity. What I want you to take away from this introduction is that there are many great applications where we can use AI to help people be better at their tasks, to augment them, to be better learners, better designers, or take better care of their body. The key is to keep users, communities, and society's needs at the center of these smart interface designs. It's critical that we design at these 3 levels. We are in the early days of finding the right design processes to practice truly human-centered AI. You can start by designing with communities beyond your direct user population. And if you do, you will create AI systems that are more likely to have a positive societal impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for an inspiring talk. I'll take my position as a moderator and ask the same question. Why limit to human-centered AI? Why not say human-centered technology?
So that's a good question. I mean, I think we could use some of the same ideas in technology in general, but I think there's a lot of things about AI that have side effects beyond the direct users more often. And that's not to say other technologies don't do as well, you know, whether it's technologies in energy generation or transportation, but there's a lot going on AI, whether it's the data collection or even just the use of them in society that seems to have a lot of side effects beyond the direct users. So that's the reason for this focus on community and society. But I agree with you that technology development in general could use this, but we don't see as many of these problems, at least in traditional computer user interface problems. I mean, it does happen, but it seems much more common in AI systems to have these side effects and other impacts.
But I think as a field, and you are much more, I'm looking from outside, but you are from the inside HCI, the focus has been always on the user.
Yeah.
Much less on community and almost none on society.
Correct. So yeah, I would say my field, human-computer interaction, has done a great job of getting, you know, industry and research to understand the importance of, you know, designing with the user in mind, and that's been great. But it does kind of ignore these larger, wider problems, and I think part of this is to kind of wake up that field to say, hey, we've done user-centered design, but now we need to figure out how to do this at these other levels. And that's not to say people aren't doing it. There are people, but there really isn't an integrated process that puts it all together in the way that we have a process for user-centered design that I can teach in one semester and have students go off to industry and, you know, not be experts at it, but apply it competently. We need to develop the same kind of tools, as well as processes to do these problems. And it's harder because some of these problems are harder to analyze, and truly one person won't have the skills to do all of it. That's why the need for these teams. But I agree with you that this could be more broadly applied than just AI. But right now, AI people are building these systems and they're ignoring all of these issues, in my opinion. And I think that's going to have a lot of negative impact.
Hannes, you have a question.
Yes, first of all, thanks for your excellent presentation. I have two short questions. One is, in your framework of user, community, and society, shouldn't you add also nature and the environment, ecological reasoning?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And it's a point that some of my students have brought up, which said, hey, why is this human-centered AI? Why is it not Earth or world or environment or animal? So I do think there are other ways of framing it to get at a broader bit. I personally think that might just be biting off more than we can chew immediately. I think some of those things can be analyzed within community or society. You know, society, we care about what's the impact on our environment and places we live. So I think we can get at those impacts in those other areas. But I agree with you, there are other framings that could cause it to have better focus for, let's say, the environment or for animals. And I think taking it in some other angle, like animals, might cause someone to really look at the world in a different way that could be useful. That wasn't my goal, but I could see using some of the same ideas targeted it differently would generate some interesting results in itself. So I totally agree with that as a potential criticism for the way I've taken it.
No, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. The second question is also a small one, but maybe with a big impact, because we are fighting, or we are, let's say, working on having political impact, because at the end it's about policy and politics. And so how do we achieve that? Because at the end there has to be political decision making in a democratic way. And so how can we do that as an academic, let's say, initiative and group, and as an academic activity? So this is what I was thinking is having a cooperation with NGOs, civil society is one way to approach this political level.
Yeah, so I agree. Some of this is oriented towards, hey, if you just have the right team, they'll do good stuff. But there are still problems that will be generated that they didn't anticipate. And then we also have the problem of bad actors who could care less, and they're just motivated by what they're usually motivated by, which is money and power. And so we definitely want to be able to impact policy, impact law. So I would say some of the things that would come out of the societal level analyses of these projects should help inform groups that are focused on policy and law. Again, it's not my expertise. And also in this talk, I feel like I'm hand waving by saying, hey, we need to do this and this, but we haven't actually done all this. And so it's hard for me to do the concrete details of how to do it. I feel like I'm starting a conversation with this to say, hey, this is where we need to go. And I want all my friends, like people on this line, like Allison, I see with her hand up there, to join me in trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Allison.
Yes, thanks very much, James. That was a great talk. And I really appreciate how this has evolved in a quite effective way. I just had two quick questions about the rubric, the 3 levels of analysis, which I think is a great point of departure. And the first has to do with the place of politics. You know, so where do political regimes and geopolitics fit into this 3 level of analysis rubric, since regulating AI is ultimately a political problem? So this is sort of a variant of Hannes's question. I think you're placing it at the societal level based on your concluding remarks inspired by Kendi, but you could also see it at the community level as well, depending on how you're defining society. So that's the first question is, you know, where does politics fit in? And the second is kind of related. What distinguishes community from society?
Yeah, those are great questions.
Yeah,
so
when you first is it Gemeinschaft, Gesellschaft, or you know, is the community a firm, or is it a marginalized group?
Yeah. So first, politics.
Yeah.
I personally saw it more at the society and community level, but I think it could be at all levels. So for example, let's say we decided that things like ChatGPT, we decide, I'm not saying we should do this, but let's say we decided you have to disclose that an AI is speaking to you in some product. Like let's say we made that the law. Well, then that comes in even at the user-centered level, because it's going to directly impact how we design that interface for particular users. So I think politics can and law can infuse all of these levels, but I see more of the community and society level more likely where you're going to interact there, but I could see it kind of touching at every levels. And again, we haven't done it, so it's hard for me to define it concretely, but that's my instinct to it. In terms of the community and society, to me, again, it's kind of fuzzy. I felt community was more a direct set of people that you really could engage and were somewhat closer to the particular products that you were designing for. And to me, society was just like, take it up to everybody, like a whole nation, a whole country. And at that point, that's harder to analyze in the same way. So it's almost the techniques that would have to be used to deal with issues are different as much as just kind of the scale. But where the line is between them, that I'm not sure. And I think I have to work with people who are the experts in those levels, like you, to go, hey, what techniques work at this level and which don't? And like, I feel like that's the next step of this work is I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the bottom level, because that's the part, we've been all doing for a long time. But yeah, what we do at those next two levels and how to integrate between them, that's the part that I think needs more work.
Yeah, it's a really useful lens. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
Klaus.
Yeah, thank you also for the great talk. I have a question concerning individual rights and human rights. Where's the place for individual rights and human rights in your approach? I think this could be an important point, because AI for good could be misunderstood as only good for the common good, and the common good is not necessarily the same as individual rights. And I think if we want to have a human-centered AI, it's very important to take this into consideration.
Yeah, so that's a great question also. I mean, part of me would say, oh, at the user-centered level, we should consider that. But I would say we often don't, because there's some assumption that, oh, what I'm building is good for that person. That's why I'm analyzing them. So I actually think that as we get to that community-centered level, that's one way we start to get at those rights, because then that analysis is what uncovers tensions between, oh, the value that customer or user I was designing for versus other people who are somehow affected by it, and what are their rights, right? And so I think that when we get to that level, it starts to raise those questions of human rights and individual rights. And again, at society level, I think that occurs also. So I think those are the levels that are purposeful to kind of raise those questions, because they now become a counterweight to, hey, I was designing it for this person who wants this thing. They decided they want to buy this thing. Isn't that great? They've got their rights. But now I want to kind of set that off against people who it's affecting, who had no kind of say in this, and maybe they should have a say. So that's kind of where I think some of those issues come in. I think it also comes in at the user-centered level, just as we try to design for what they want. But when we do that, often those tensions should be more obvious, because those are the people we're talking to. I think it's the ones that are less obvious where those rights need to be considered, and that's the community and the society level. So I think they'll come in more there. But again, remains to be seen. This is a process that has not been done. It's purely a hypothetical.
George has a question.
Together with my thanks, just a follow-up to the last two questions. The first is, would the concern and design for impact on democracy fit under at the society level? Or to put it differently, AI for a democratic society in the broad sense?
Yeah.
And then, as a follow-up to the last question, some of that necessarily involves also empowering the citizen who will have to operate in such a democratic context. So that also affects the user level.
Yeah. So I didn't really go into that example deeply, but I think if we use the same analysis, for example, on social networks, we would find, that if we looked at the societal level or maybe even community level, that we would find obvious negative impacts of using AI to spread viral information that was misinformation. And that would have led us to design from the start, how do we avoid that? Now, in the end, this doesn't solve all problems, because we know, for example, inside of organizations like Facebook, they've had teams that have told them about these kind of problems and have posed real solutions. But at every level, when it comes down to a decision of, do I make more money or do I make less money? More money seems to win. And without legal constraints on these companies, without legal constraints on like who can be on their board of directors and what kind of power they actually have, we have these companies that are controlled by entrepreneurs with no real oversight. The board of Facebook or the board of Google cannot tell the founders what to do because they have used securities laws in the United States, at least, to give them ultimate power. And we have no regulation of what they need to do. So some of that are legal problems that even if we design this way, we might have designed the right mechanisms, but they assume people who want to do the right thing. And if at some power of these founders and these companies totally trumps that, then the only way to deal with it is legal recourse, in my opinion. But now it's possible that if we did this analysis earlier on, we might have known what legal mechanisms we need to have in place earlier than maybe today, where people are aware of these problems. We might have been aware of it 5 or 10 years ago and avoided some of the issues. So part of this, if we do this, maybe we're going to get ahead of the next problems that we haven't seen yet. I think we understand what some of the problems are with misinformation and social media now and how it's been negative for democracy. But there's going to be some other things. For example, we're going to be able to fake agents and manipulate people. That's going to have a major impact on democracy. Could we get ahead on that very soon and start to kind of regulate what you need to do there, or else we're going to have way worse impacts than we saw just through Facebook on elections. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Hello, thank you very much for that very interesting talk. So my question, I'm trying to, one aspect about designing AIs, etc., is proactively. That is, do no harm kind of a philosophy and how we get forward on that. But in the end, harm will happen. We can't avoid it. It happens in human society. So human society before AI has evolved over the centuries, various mechanisms for repair and restitution and justice. What I'd like to know is if you or Emma have been studying how that will evolve as AI plays a bigger role. I mean, a simple example would be simply a self-driving car that goes wrong. Who blames? Who pays? How does justice evolve in a world where AI is a bigger and bigger role player?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I would say I'm not an expert in this, so I'd be careful with what I say. I do believe that, yes, part of this is to try to help us design things better, but things are going to go wrong, either due to evil players like I described, or just due to, mistakes happen. There are mistakes. I feel like we already have a large legal structure to deal with some of these mistakes. For example, if autonomous cars did something wrong, somebody was killed, we have liability. We have all kinds of laws already set up for doing this. There may need to be minor modifications to account for these things, but to trace like who's responsible, but we already have ways of dealing with that. To me, those are less scary than these kind of those are done by actors who are acting within the laws and within the systems to try to build products. I'm more worried about kind of rogue states and other people who are trying to just get around stuff. Like that's where I think more work needs to be done, because you can't just like sue the Russians because they made horrible bots to manipulate our election, right? That you could sue them all you want, but that's not going to solve it, right? So I worry more about those things, like an autonomous car hit a person or a bike because they didn't see it properly. I think we actually have existing mechanisms to deal with that.
I'll take the last question.
I'm not sure we do. I mean, the problem, it's because now the question is who are the actors involved, who are responsible, and I gave autonomous cars only as one example. I didn't mean that specific example, but generally speaking, anywhere that AI is used to take decisions that might affect people's lives, it's hard to pinpoint at this point.
But if I buy a car, and it happens to have autonomous features and it does something badly, I sue that car company, or the government sues that car company, and there we figure out who is due to the harm. And they might say, oh, it's the company we bought the software from. I mean, there's complex products already that have ways of kind of figuring out appropriate blame in them. So, I mean, it's more complicated a little, but cars are already, for example, or airplanes, very sophisticated devices with lots of complex software, and we have ways of adjudicating that kind of decision. So I do agree with you, it has to change in some ways, but I don't think that's actually where the problems are going to lie.
This discussion I see can continue for a long time, but our time is up. So I invite people to follow up with James personally by email or other means. And it was again a very inspiring talk. And let's finish with some music.
And I really appreciate the audience. And yes, please feel free to follow up. Like I said, these are early ideas, and I want to figure out and work with you to push them forward. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, James. I think I'm just taking over for the music part, right? Thanks, Moshe, for the handover there. And just to keep this short, let me just take over the screen here. See if that works. So James proposed a reggae track in a dub version today. So for the final note, so that is a 6-minute track. So that means we have enough time to actually announce the 2 next events. So the next one will be on February 21st. Tina Peterson of the University of Texas in Austin will talk about abstracted power and responsibility. Carlo Getzi will moderate that one. And on March 7th, Cory Doctorow will urge us to seize the means of computation, and that will be moderated by Alison Stanger. And so now for the final notes, it's Bingy Man elements in the dub version. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, James, for picking this one. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and see you next time. And I guess, God bless.
Goodbye.